Hi, everybody, and welcome back. In this video here, we're going to review some ways that you can format your cells. And we've started talking about this already, so this may be a review, particularly if you're already a little bit familiar with Excel. But it's worth going through again and going into it a little bit deeper in this video. So I'm going to just be looking at my notes a little bit if you see me looking off to the side to make sure I cover everything I want to. And I have an Excel file already open here for us to work with. And you can see it has two different sheets. You see two different tabs at the bottom. And then it has some basic information in here. And say hi to, this is my puppy Griffin, by the way, that you may see occasionally. He likes to say hi. So we have some basic information here. And I just kind of want to take this video and just play around with some fonts and colors and things like that. So one thing I do want to note is that you do have a theme setting within Excel, and it defaults automatically to Microsoft's just kind of standard theme when you open up a workbook. But you can also go in and update that and change that. And you can change your own fonts and colors and things like that. And usually the goal is to have something that is visually appealing, right? So we don't want to overdo it with colors or different kinds of fonts and things. But we also like to, make sure we clarify certain areas or highlight them as well. All right, sorry, I paused the video there to give Griffin some time to go settle down. So let's get back to it. So again, I just want to play around with some of the different fonts and things, and you can do this on your own at home and try it out, and also, read through the text and go through specific examples. But I just want to show you the different tools that you can use. So I was saying that Microsoft does default to the Office theme, and the theme is really just a set of recommended fonts and colors where they all kind of flow together and look nice together. But you don't have to stick with that. And you can actually change the theme if you go to page layout up top. And I'm just in Microsoft 365 right now. You can see the themes over here. So they just kind of have a grouping of colors that go nicely together. And again, you don't have to use them or anything like this, but you'll see those themes and I'll show you them back on the home screen, how they're organized. But you could change the theme here. This is the default one that Office goes to, and you can see the colors that they tend to recommend that go together, but you don't have to use that. You could use something else, for instance. And you can kind of see in the background that my fonts are updating as I check on different themes, right? So if I check on this theme versus Office theme and so on. So I'm going to leave it on the Office theme. I'm going to go back to home. And if I look at the font up here, so I'm just selecting cell A1 here. You can see that they have theme fonts up top. So these are the fonts that are automatically used with that theme that we've selected. And again, we're just using the default Office theme here. So they use Calibri or Calibri Light as the background font, but you can change that as well. So underneath you have all fonts, so I could change it to anything that I want to, and you can see as I'm scrolling over here that changes, that preview is happening on the left. It doesn't actually change until I click and pick a new font, for instance, but I can go through and try other ones out. I don't have to stick with the theme fonts. And when I change those, again, you can change the theme and still use the fonts that you have chosen if you don't like the theme fonts. I'm just going to go with, I don't know, let's pick Arial instead. So you can see this cell stayed Calibri. This one has changed now. You can also see that you have the standard 11 size font is their default when you go in, but you can change that too. So if I click on cell A1, maybe I would like to make this bigger. So that the title is, your eye is more drawn to the title. So maybe I'll make that size 18 instead. And I can also change if I want it to be bold, italicized, underlined. I can click this little arrow, do a double underline, for instance, and so on. So maybe I want that to be bold. If I don't like the bold, I can just unclick it and then we'll go back to normal. If I want to italicize, if I want to underline, and so on. Okay, so you can go ahead and kind of play around with some of those features there as well. You can also change your borders here, but we'll do some more with borders later. So we'll kind of stick with just the font stuff for the moment. You have shortcuts too. So if you read through your text, you'll see some shortcuts there. So for instance, If you don't like just clicking around, you can also use Control B to bold, Control I to italicize, for instance, or Control U for underline. So you can use shortcuts if you prefer. Sometimes I'll use those if I'm typing a lot, but otherwise it's pretty easy just to click on a cell and change that font, the size, and then the feature, bold, italicize, underline. You can also change color. So if I go over here to the letter A, that is my text color, so my font color. And I can click down and you can see up here you have the theme colors. So the colors that they recommend kind of go together, but you don't have to use that. You could use your standard colors, or if you go to more colors, you can actually kind of open a color wheel here and try some different colors there as well. And you can see how that would change the whole cell. So as I'm doing this, I have the entire cell selected, not just one word. So I'm just clicking the cell. And I can also change the highlight area in the background. So that background area by using this key here. So that's your fill color. So it's defaulting to yellow, but again, I can go in here. I see my theme colors up top, my standard colors. I could do no fill, right? So if you change your mind, you don't have to use that. And again, I could choose more colors and I don't know, I'm just gonna pick one here. And that cell will fill. Now remember, my cell is only this big where the yellow is, but the words are extended beyond the cell. So I may want to come in here and again, do some tweaking and maybe make that cell longer so that it fits a little bit better. All right, you don't have to actually change the color on the entire cell if you don't want to. So you can do it word by word. And what you would do is you would double click into the cell. So now you can see my cursor has appeared and just highlight the word that you want to change. So maybe I want to leave the word bay and I want to make that, I don't know, green. So I can also not just click the cell, but double click into that cell so my cursor appears and then actually just highlight or select the word or words that I want to change color. So you don't have to do it for the entire cell. And I can do the same thing with the size. I don't know why you'd want to do this, but you could, right? So you can change the size of just one word, for instance. And again, I encourage you just to kind of go in and play around and practice there. I just extended the size of my cell just to make it a little bit easier to read, more visually appealing. And I used a trick from one of our former videos where I put my cursor right in between those two columns up top and I double clicked and it will automatically go to the longest length in that column and fix that for me. So I don't have to do it manually if I don't want to. Some things to think about as well as you're designing your workbook. Again, our goal is to make it visually appealing. So what I have here, this is not very visually appealing to me. I'm just playing around. So we want to use colors in a way that makes sense. We don't want to overdo it, right? We don't want to distract the reader. We want to help them draw their eye where it needs to go or highlight certain pieces of information. You may also want to consider the size of your font. And also which font you use for people who may be using screen readers as well. So you may need to use a 12-point font instead, or a 14, for instance, or maybe change your font. Notice how some of the fonts have, let me see if I can find Times New Roman for you guys, because that's a classic. So see how in Times New Roman, a lot of the letters have like feet on them. At the bottom of the N, you have this little foot here. Same thing on the R or the M's here. So that's one style. And then there's other styles like the Calibri, for instance, or the Tacoma here, where you don't have those little feet. And again, you can read your text for more formal language here, but that also makes a difference. A lot of times people who are using screen readers, it's easier if they do not have those little feet on the bottom. So Calibri that we default to tends to be a nice font for that. Although you probably would want to go up to size 12 instead of 11. So some things to think about is, who are you designing this workbook for, and who's going to have access to it. Other things you may want to do is you may want to use color to differentiate that differentiate between different types of cell content. So for instance, maybe I'm doing a file that I want somebody to fill out. Perhaps I would highlight cells. Maybe I would just make them like a light gray color, for instance, where I want you to fill out your information. Or maybe I'm going to highlight cells that have formulas in them or that have important pieces of information. So I can use color that way as well to encourage or let people know, hey, you should be filling out your information in these cells here. So that's another way we could do it. You do want to avoid color combinations that are difficult to read. Again, you don't want to make this distracting. Like right here, this is not really a very nice or appealing color combination. So I'd want to be careful there. And again, you also want to think about people who may be colorblind. So for instance, red and green, when you combine them together, let's say like a green background with red letters can be very difficult for some people to read or see at all. So again, you want to consider your audience and make it visually appealing and helpful, not distracting and difficult. Another thing you want to consider as well when you're choosing your colors is that some people may want to print their workbook. Some people have color printers, others don't. So you may want to print your own workbook or your own sheets at home, let's say before you're giving a presentation or something that you're going to email out to everybody, on both color and also in black and white to see what it actually looks like when that's printed. You may get home and print it out and say, oh, actually, this looks terrible when I print it, right? It doesn't look as good as it does on my screen. Or, wow, the black and white, I really can't see that gray color, or that gray is too dark, it's hiding the words in the back. So again, just some tips when thinking about color as you go through. All right, so you can also change the tab colors at the bottom. So you can see right now I have the documentation tab selected. And if I right click on that, it brings up different options here. But tab color is one we haven't seen yet. And you can select a tab color. I'm just going to choose like a gold color here. And you can see how the background down here is changing. So watch. I choose gold. I can see the background becomes gold, or I could choose blue, green, red, whatever you want to do. And it's more of a faded color, which is kind of nice. So you can do that. I could change the documentation background. And then for sales report, maybe I want to make that one, we'll make it blue. So that's highlighted, it's not as dark, but when you unselect it, it does go a little bit darker. So that's helpful too, just to kind of show the different tabs at the bottom if you think that would be beneficial for your group or your presentation, whoever you're working with. All right, so I think the last thing I want to show in this video, and again, I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I don't forget anything that I want to cover, is to add a background image. So I don't know how often you may want to do this, but if you want to add background images, you can do that as well. So I can go back to page layout here. And then here, again, you have more options. You can see those themes again, the colors that are selected for the themes, right? Different, you have a grayscale here, blue, warm, blue, yellow, etc. So again, you can kind of play around at home, different fonts. And again, they give you the fonts in that particular theme, different effects that you could use and, and so on. But if I select background, that will actually allow me to either search for an image that I may want to use, or I can select from a file, or, if you have a OneDrive account or some sort of cloud account, you can do that too. I do have one that is going to be shared with you in Blackboard, so you can try this at home, that I'm going to use. So I'm going to hit from a file. And then you would have this file stored wherever is most useful on your own computer, right? So for me, I already have it opened here. I have it stored in one of my folders. So I would go and select the file that I want to use, and I can hit insert, and it changes the background color. Again, you may or may not find this helpful. For me, I usually prefer cleaner backgrounds, if I'm being honest. This one's not too bad, but you want to make sure that it enhances your project and not distracts from your project. Myself being a math person, you'll see that we like really clean graphs, clean tables, clean images, not too much clutter, enough to draw the eye where it needs to go, but not to distract. So it is a very fine balance there, and it takes some tweaking. So let's say you decide you don't like the background. You're like, oh, I really don't like that. That doesn't work for me. You can always go ahead and delete it right here. So delete background, and it will revert back to your basic Excel sheet there. Okay, so I think that's all I want to do in this video. Again, just some review about formatting, color, font, all that good stuff. And again, I encourage you to try some of these changes at home and try different combinations that you think actually work and look nice as well.